Hey, friend, welcome to the podcast. You Are Significant, the podcast where you will hear real stories from real people and we will get down into the truths of your own significance. You were created on purpose for a purpose with seeds of greatness inside of you. Now, let's get down to it.
I'm so excited for this episode of You Are Significant because I believe that many of us are in a season of growth, of change, of healing. And one thing that has come to mind is just how far we have come since the pandemic because it truly was so impactful on many of us in many different ways to live through that time, whether you were an adult, a teenager, or a child. And the ramifications of living through that event are ongoing. And whether we want to think about it, maybe if you're like me, sometimes you just really don't want to talk about that time period, but it continues to impact us. And as we continue to grow in this season, that we're in this climate, in these circumstances, with the president that we have, with the economy that we have, with our own economy, our personal economy inside of our own bank accounts, where we are mentally, where we are physically and emotionally and even spiritually as you continue to grow and move towards your goals, we have to acknowledge the resistance. We have to take a look at where the resistance is coming from. And as we see that resistance, actually look at it as a positive, as a sign that because we're facing resistance, because as we go down this path, towards where we want to be, the body we do want to have, the finances we do want to open our bank account, and that number we do want to see. As we do grow for our goals, that as we are encountering resistance, that's actually a sign I am on track. I am doing the right thing. Because if I was just staying in the bed, if I was just sitting in front of the TV, if I was just scrolling reels, I would not be facing this resistance. I would not be encountering challenges. I would not be having to scramble and find money to pay for my business that I'm growing. I wouldn't have to be figuring out what hormone type I am so that I know what kind of foods I need to eat in order to live healthy and lose weight. I would not have to be figuring out where we should go to church if you haven't been back to church in since the pandemic. Maybe you've done virtual church, online church, but maybe you're like, you know what? My soul is yearning for real people, real relationships, that in person experience that can only be had when we actually go. And I hope that you're feeling that because I think God created us. Hebrews 10:25 is so blunt about it. It says, not forsaking the assembling of yourselves together. So that verse tells us we were meant to be in person for church. I understand and I'm thankful too that there are virtual options. But when your soul is not feeling fed, there's a reason, my friend. And so, as you go for your goals and you're creating the life that you want to live and you're doing things, there is going to be resistance. So, on this episode today, I want to encourage you that you are on track in some ways to overcome that resistance and to be encouraged instead of shrinking back and being smaller like Satan wants us to do. He doesn't want us to do big things, does he? If you are encountering resistance, that's because Satan doesn't want you to grow. He wants you to be small. He wants you to sit down and shut up. He doesn't want there to be change for the good. He wants there to be shrinkage and change for evil. He wants the days to get more and more evil. And we could sit here and have a podcast about that. But this podcast is to focus on when you are encountering resistance, you're on the right track. So keep encountering it. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't listen to those red light stories that are in your head that are like, oh, just sit on the couch tonight. You don't need to get up and do your 10, 20-minute of exercise. Just sit on the couch. Let somebody else, like for me, for instance, last night, the dog. Our puppy is 4 months old today. He was born on May 5th, and he's a chocolate lab. He's so energetic. He's already digging in my flower beds. He's discovered the flower beds in the last week or so, and he's digging up the paper and digging up the dirt and digging up the topsoil that we put down so that the flowers could grow. And he's even broken off a couple of branches of my precious, prized strawberries and cream hydrangea bush that my sweet friend Mally gave me for my 50th birthday. So this morning when I'm out there walking the dog first thing in the wee hours of the morning at 5:30, I notice a couple of little small branches broken off this very very early bush that is not a baby, but it's also not a an adult bush. So losing a branch or two is I'm not panicking, but I'm like, okay, I'm just going to look at that like the dog helped me prune my bush. And it's totally fine. There's lots of blooms, my 10 blooms, now there's about 7 and there's still plenty of blooms. It's still healthy. He didn't dig up all the dirt. We're okay. It's going to be okay. Just breathe. We talk about breathing a lot on this podcast, right? Just breathe. So I keep playing with the dog, but I'm already thinking we have to build a pen. We promised Joe a dog when we moved in this house that he could get a dog, and that would be part of his blessing for moving because moving from your home that you've lived in forever is a big deal. And we acknowledge that. We fully acknowledge that. So we told him we would get a dog and we knew we were going to get a certain breed. We were not just going to fly by the seat of our pants. We've tried that a few times and it didn't work out. One time we got a puppy from a litter and 5 of the puppies were one breed and 2 were another breed from the same litter, and we raised that puppy. He was so cute. He was like a black and white teddy bear. He was long-haired, so fluffy and cute, and the sweetest dog. But he ended up being a very high energy dog that we had just a small backyard, and our yard did not fit this dog. So we found him a home where there was 10 acres that he could run and roam and just he was an Australian Shepherd mix with Blue Heeler. And when you look up that breed, it says not ideal for children because they have so much energy. They don't mean to hurt your child, but they will jump, they will run and jump on them. And so at the time Joe was still pretty young, so we rehomed that dog. So this time we were like, we're going to get a lab. And we found somebody who had a lab that they loved, and their lab was already over a year old, so we could see what personality the dog had and what it looked like. And so we got a dog from a breeder in May. And so now he is 4 months old. And there's going to be resistance when you're keeping your word to your child and you're following through and you're getting this child who is a teenager a puppy. And there's been lots of resistance because, for one, did we really want a puppy ourselves, living in a new house, starting a new job, growing a business? No. As much as we love animals, and we have a whole lot of animals, we have a bearded dragon, we have 2 tanks of fish, we have an 13-year-old cat, maybe he's 14. We got him for, yeah, he's 13 this year. And we really didn't need and we had a turtle, but our turtle recently passed away, and I was so sad for him. I was surprised how sad I was for him when he passed away, but now we have a puppy, and when you think about the other kinds of animals that we have, they live in tanks. They can stay in their tank, in their enclosure, and be safe and fed and warm and still enjoy them. We did get the turtle out a little bit, but he was a red-eared slider, so he loved the water. He was a water turtle. And my bearded dragon, he was Joe's. Joe decided he didn't want him anymore as far as taking care of him, and I was like, "No, we're not getting rid of the bearded dragon. I love him." So, we've kept him, and in this house, we've gotten him out a lot more, but now that we have the dog, I don't want the dog to accidentally hurt him or kill him, so he's been staying in his enclosure a lot more. And now that we have this puppy, yes, a cat doesn't stay in an enclosure, but our cat is old, so he is really mellowed out so much because really he has been a protector of our home and fought off squirrels and chipmunks and things that would eat all my tulips and even chew on the house when we had a southwestern cedar home, the one that we moved from. And he's made a good adjustment to our move. He's been doing well, especially since we got the fenced in backyard, which, by the way, I have a little bit of a cold, so you may hear that in my voice, or if you're watching the podcast on YouTube, you may see me use a tissue. But resistance is happening big time right now because he's 4 months old. He hasn't cut his adult teeth yet. He still has his baby teeth. And when we looked it up, from 6 months old to it's gonna be 6 or 8 months old before he has his adult teeth. So we are just going into the real stages of him losing his baby teeth, I guess. That's what I read as they're going to fall out, and I'm like, "Is he gonna swallow them? Are we gonna find these teeth places?" I don't know how this is gonna work because this is our first puppy to raise. We've had another dog, but we got that dog as an adult already. So we're learning along the way. Thank you, Lord, for Google and ChatGPT that we can do research and figure out what to expect. Plus, since we got him from a breeder, we can call the breeder and ask questions. And he's the sweetest puppy. If you haven't seen him yet, go look on my Instagram and you will see. And there's a hilarious one of him with our cat, Clem, and the cat has put him in his place. He does try to get rambunctious, and we call it zoomies. Whenever he's just going crazy and running, he tries to take out his zoomies on the cat, but the cat puts him in his place. So Clem is going to be okay, even though he's old. He truly is. And I want to encourage you that as you are doing the things that you want to do, living the life that you want to live, and you are encountering resistance and you are encountering challenges like me going out there and finding my precious prize strawberries and cream hydrangea pruned, quote unquote. Those are the kinds of resistance, and that's minor, right? Maybe you are trying to grow a business and there's a lot of resistance when you are an entrepreneur. And I know that a lot of my friends, I know you are, many of you are entrepreneurs. And a lot of times people on the outside looking in are like, oh, what do you do besides, X? And there's taxes, there's paperwork, there's creating, there's disputes, there's the fees, there's finding professionals you can work with, that you can trust, that keep their word, that aren't deceiving you and scamming you. There's so many aspects to this, right? And then there's turning it over to God, because as a Christian entrepreneur, we promise still to be anxious for nothing and cast all our care on Him. And so, as we're doing that, and as we encounter that resistance, then reconciling these two things of I'm encountering resistance, but I also want to stay in joy and I want to live into the fruit of the Spirit, love and joy and peace, and not be terrified that it could all just stop or dry up or go wrong tomorrow or tonight even, right? So many of us, you've got the deadline of everything's gonna run through your bank account at 9 or by midnight, and just trying to make sure that everybody gets paid that you promised to pay, and everything gets created that you were working to create, and that the business is still running. The customers are happy. If you have a team or employees that they are taken care of, they're getting the support that they need, they're getting paid well. If you have employees, if you have team members and they're producing, that they are inspired, that they're getting their questions answered, that they have incentives that are blessing them to continue to be inspired to create. There's a lot to it, but when we look at the Proverbs 31 woman, did she have any resistance? So many of the Bible characters, now that I'm 50, I think about the resistance that they must have felt and must have encountered, even if we don't read about all of it. Even Adam and Eve, after they left the garden, they were told it was going to be by the sweat of their brow, by Adam was told it was going to be by the sweat of your brow you're going to produce. And Eve, she was going to be in pain in childbearing and still desire her husband. I take that as you're going to be so mad after that first baby is born at the pain you went through. Not the moment you hold your child. When you hold your child, it's, oh, this was all worth it. It was still scary, still painful, but all worth it. But you still may be like, "You're never touching me again." And God says, "No, you're gonna want to have more children. You are gonna want to be husband and wife, and that's part of your curse." So, I'm sorry. I know it's not funny, but it is funny, right? And so, as we encounter the pain of life and the thorns and the thistles that are that resistance, then it's part of God's plan. Even from the beginning, we can see He wanted Adam to tend the earth. He wanted him to have dominion. He wanted him to take care of the animals. He wanted him to produce fruit with his wife, as in children, and also fruit as in crops, because they needed to eat. And they weren't in the Garden of Eden anymore, where everything was provided. And so, even when you look at that original couple, the original family, the original plan was no resistance, that everything was perfect. But then, when sin entered the world and Eve ate that forbidden fruit and gave it to Adam, and he ate also, there began the resistance. And so it was going to be passed down until Jesus comes back and takes us all home. There will be resistance. So there isn't any getting around it. It's not because you did anything wrong, it's because sin entered the world. And even Paul the Apostle, when you read the New Testament, did he have resistance? He wrote many of the books of the New Testament, and he traveled to many churches. What happened in his travels? What happened as he grew churches and helped churches to get started in different cities? There was resistance. There was pain. He lists all of the things he went through: shipwreck, stoning, all being beaten, all these things. And the last thing he says that above all was the hardest was his care for the churches. He cared for the people. And so relationships is a part of our life. No matter what you do, you have a mother you were born from, you have a father you were born from. You might have siblings, you might have children, you might be married. If you work for someone else, you have a boss, you might have coworkers. If you work for yourself, you have customers, you might have employees. Relationships is a part of our life. And anytime there's relationships, there is going to be resistance. For one reason is because you are in your growth track and they are on their growth track. And we don't match up perfectly. Even your spouse, you don't match up perfectly. There's difference. My husband and I, when we married, when we dated, we were so googly and oogly and just so in love and just couldn't spend enough time together. And then as we got married, even before we got married, I met his parents, and he told me a little bit about his background. I saw the things that were alike. We both had grown up moving a lot. He moved with his dad being in the Navy. I moved with my dad being in ministry. We both lived in three different places in fifth grade. He moved to Washington State. I moved to a city called Washington in Illinois, a town. And there were other things that we had in common, but as we got married, we learned that our families communicated very differently. And my family was very open. It wasn't perfect. And as I've gotten older and older, of course, I learned more things. But when I was getting married at 19 and my husband was 26, what we saw was, wow, your family was secretive and didn't communicate a lot. And there was a lot of what do you call it? Dysfunction, I guess is, I hate to use that word, but ultimately without communication, that's what you have. And in my family, again, not perfect by far, but there was a lot of communication. My dad was home a lot. He was in and out a lot from at home with going to Bible studies. My mom was not. She wasn't able to work outside the home, probably wouldn't have worked outside the home anyway because of her convictions. And so she was home. She was home all the time. And I loved that growing up because she was always available. I hate that it was a lot in part because she was sick. It wasn't actually because of her convictions. She just wasn't able to go do a lot of things because she was very sick a lot of my life. She had severe fibromyalgia. If you followed the podcast, you've heard a lot about my mom and her story. But if you're new and never heard if this is your first episode, my mom had COPD. She ended up with COPD, not from smoking. She had non-smokers COPD. And but the biggest first issue she was diagnosed with at 26 was fibromyalgia. And hers was severe. She felt like she was having a heart attack. Her chest would hurt, her arms would hurt. She would have no energy, and so she spent a lot of time having to rest in a recliner. And now we know trauma and a lot of things contributed, and there might have been some things that would have helped her heal. I'm sure there was, but at the time, there was still a lot being learned about fibromyalgia, and not passing any judgment on anyone else who has it, but just talking about my mom and how it affected her and why she had it. And if trauma is undealt with, then the illness stays. And I've seen that in my own life because I realized after I had a high fever as an adult, I already had some of my children, if not all three of the girls were born. My son wasn't yet. But after that fever, I could see a vision and I knew I had been molested as a baby. And so, as I took a homeopathic remedy for that and some chronic eczema that my fingers split open and bled and it would not stop. I'd already done homeopathy a long time and asked my practitioner, this is what's going on. It's not resolving. We tried everything, it didn't resolve. And then I had that fever and could see that memory. And I took the remedy for that and it cleared up and it's never come back. I don't have any eczema. My hands are just fine. If you're on the YouTube, I'm showing you my hands. So they're healed in the name of Jesus. Thank you, Lord. And of course, I give God all the glory, but He does work through medicine and He works through natural medicine too. Resistance is going to come when you are healing and when you are working on your past and you are working on your present and you are working into your future. And I am so grateful that as my husband and I figured out we had come from two different families with two different modes of operation, that over the 31 years that we've been married, that it's still a struggle, but thankfully, we've worked on it a lot with marriage counseling, recovery, and we're just so blessed that it's a lot better. We still this morning, we sat down he sat down at we have a big bar in our kitchen, and I stood there and ate my breakfast, and he sat at the on the chair at the bar stool, and we sat across from each other. Me standing there eating my breakfast, and he started telling me things from this week because he was gonna run out the door, and I was like, "Wait, you haven't had a chance to tell me about how your appointment went yesterday." And so the resistance there was the pressure of time, and that time is moving and it's slipping away, and I've got to be somewhere next. And we just took the time before he had to go travel back to Huntsville for him to go over different things that he went over yesterday. And he got out his portfolio and his papers and told me about it. And so there's things going on. I don't assume anymore that husbands and wives have talked and know the same things. I think it's really common in marriages that husbands and wives are moving fast. They're two ships passing in the night, passing in the day, and we have to be purposeful in our marriages to communicate with each other in order to not remove the resistance, but deal with the resistance in a healthy way and to say, you know what? I'm not going to move on to the next thing until I've had time to talk to my spouse. And not just say, I love you, you look gorgeous, you turn me on, you're so hot, but to say, "Hey, what do you think? Tell me about how's your week been? How did your appointment go with so and you know what? It would be okay, even with your spouse, to take notes in your phone of a conversation, so next time, you know what to follow up on and ask them about. That's not being weird. That's just doing due diligence so that you can stay connected. So, especially as high achievers, if you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner or you're a CEO or you're a manager even of in your company, you have a lot of responsibilities and that is you're a high performer. And so as a high performer, it's important to be very intentional because you're going to probably have less downtime. And even in other situations, the time is taken up from kids being in sports, or you have a special needs child, or you volunteer a lot at your church. There's always things that take our time up. People, when they notice that you have a good personality and you show up and you are responsible, you're going to get asked to lead. And that's going to take time, your time and your thoughts. And be intentional so that when that resistance of the time and your energy is being used to accomplish things is happening, that you can still feed into your relationships. You can still fuel and grow your relationships. And this is true not just with your spouse, but also with your children, and especially as your children get older and don't live with you. Resistance reveals importance, doesn't it? We don't feel resistance to things that don't matter. If the enemy can't destroy your calling, he'll try to discourage you. Ephesians 6:12. Resistance will strengthen you. Just like lifting weights, pushing against resistance builds muscle. Your spiritual and mental muscles grow when you keep moving forward despite obstacles. Resistance protects alignment. Sometimes resistance forces us to pause, pray, and check motives. God can use resistance to refine your path so it's in alignment with His will. And finally, resistance signals growth. Every breakthrough in life, whether starting a new habit, launching a business, or deepening your faith, comes with an almost quit moment, right? That's when you lean in and trust that breakthrough is near. So if you're feeling resistance right now, don't shrink back. Ask God if it's protection or preparation. Then step boldly into what He's calling you to. Romans 8:37 says, "We are more than conquerors through Him who loved us."
Thank you for tuning in to You Are Significant. I hope this episode inspired you to embrace your own God given purpose. If this episode inspired you and blessed you, would you please share it out with a friend who needs to be reminded of their own significance? And remember to hit subscribe. Until next time, remember to walk in faith, find the joy, and stand in your significance.